Hello, good evening and welcome to another program on Law and Order. As you know, law deals with almost every aspect of our life. And when we go on the road or take a flight or go on the sea or ship a goods from the sea, law deals with that. And sometimes in most of the other countries, you see different people are traveling in different intermodal transport mechanisms. That is, you come from a train, get into a bus and go to your office, and sometimes in the intermediary time you take a taxi. But today we are going to focus on law and order, on some aspects of laws that relates to transport. I'm not going to talk about transport laws that might entail you buying a ticket on a train, but transport laws that you might need to know on international transport. So today we are going to talk about international transport law on law and order. And like always, we have expert guests on that. And my guest today is once again Chandaka Jayasundara, President's Counsel and a specialist in international transport law, among other things. Chandra, thank you very much for coming back to the studio. I couldn't wish you for newly becoming a President's Counsel, and my wishes once again for that. And international transport law, when you hear about this, it looks a vast topic, and lots of different countries, like different areas like EU and all that might be having different meaning. So I'm not going to ask you a definition, but can you tell me where does international transport law applies, in which kind of a transaction?
It is a vast subject because you're talking about transportation from one country to another.
Yeah.
That will entail different aspects. One is it entails a lot of, and there are applicable conventions, international conventions that apply to certain carriage transportation. Then depending on the area, say for example South America has a separate convention, treaty or grouping dealing with transport in South America. There's one set of conventions for Europe, then there are other conventions for China and Russia, there's other laws. Then we have the common law countries like Sri Lanka and India, we have a completely different set of laws. So generally it's a vast area, but because of the divergence of the laws and systems that are used, from the early 20th century, there was a intention by the international community to unify and have a uniform set of laws for different aspects of transport. So the first development was for carriage by sea, which from first convention or the first agreement was in 1924, which was amended in 28, and now we have the Hague-Visby rule, which is in 1968. So that is the latest with regard to carriage by sea. Then with regard to carriage by rail, we don't have any laws. We still have the old common law. But in Europe, there is the International Convention of rail carriage by rail. Then you have the International Convention on carriage by road, especially for Europe. Then for air carriage, you have the Warsaw Convention, which was I think around 1978 or so. Yeah. So those uniform systems of law, convention laws, apply for most transportation. So the intricacies, the complexities are much less. So if you just study the separate conventions, which are, as far as Sri Lanka is concerned, the Warsaw Convention is applicable, the Hague-Visby Convention is applicable. So if you study those, you don't have to know what the law in England is, or because it's generally the same convention laws. So that has been sorted out generally. The problems that we face now are what is called the law relating to intermodal transportation. Right. Intermodal means different modes. Yes. You use it in, say for example, transportation of people. Yes. Like you get onto your car, yes, get into your car, go to your railway station, get into the railway, then you get into the train, get down, get into a bus, go to your office. That's 4 modes of transport. So you have car, rail, bus and walking. It's the same way with goods.
Right.
Intermodal means for a particular part of the carriage you use, say, a lorry to carry your goods. Then you use sea carriage. Then you might use air carriage or road or rail carriage. So it's using different modes of transport for different areas of carriage. That is intermodal. So the problem, can I expand on
Yes,
that?
yes, please do.
So the problem is you have different laws for each segment. So you have a different law for the road part, you have different law convention for the carriage, the sea part, then you have another for the rail part. So each, there is a problem as to say you ship proper like goods in good order, say in Colombo, and it ends up in, I don't know, say London or wherever, the goods are damaged. So the first problem is to ascertain or localize or locate the place where it got damaged. So if it happened during the sea carriage, then one law will apply.
Yes.
But if it happens during the rail carriage, then one convention will apply. So there's a lot of confusion as to what particular law will apply. So they are trying, there is a convention of 1982 multimodal convention, the 1980, that was never, it has never been implemented because nobody signs up for it. Then there is another convention, a recent convention, again, although most countries have signed it, most have not ratified it because it's complicated, it's very, very complicated. So the problem then is where to localize the damage. If you localize it, there is no problem, then that particular convention will apply. But if you can't localize it, you don't know where it happens, then what do? Do you have a uniform system of law for the entire carriage, or you have specific different laws? So that idea is that you, when you can't localize it, then you have a uniform system of law. That's what they tried with the multimodal convention, or you use the use a general convention, which is a problem. That is the problem everybody is still grappling with. So as far as transportation law now is concerned, the biggest or the most complicated is with regard to multimodal law.
Right. Now, when you we'll take the two examples like you said about shipping, not the domestic thing, from port to port, or the same good carried by air from the factory to the receiver, retail or wholesale. What is the type of contract you enter into for this? Are they like standard forms, or are they like a separate contract?
There are that again is a, because the nature of international transport now it's complicated, because of this fact that the whole thing started with the introduction of containers. Containers were originally used somewhere in the 1950s in the United States, where they thought they should have a uniform box to fit into a railroad car, right? So the railroad, I don't know what to call it, the railroad car was basically 20 by 10, right? So they produced this box which is basically 20 cubic meters. So that's why you call TEU, 20 TEU is that. So which could be used in the railway carriage. So you slot it in, takes it there, then you take it out and put it into a lorry, which is also at the same dimension of the box. Then you go and put it into a ship which has slots according to the each dimension. So the dimension, so it's a uniform box that you carry from one place to the other place to other. Those days shipping was quite easy. It was, if it is general cargo, it was in gunny bags or tea chest, if we are talking about tea, or if it was bulk cargo where the entire ship was sugar or entire ship was wheat or whatever. So it's with containerization that all these problems arose, because now you put the seller will put all your goods in a container, seal it, send it off, and it will come to the buyer unopened without the seal being broken unless some customs officer has looked at it. So, and it goes through these different modes of transportation. So at one point there will be, say, if you are taking it from, say, Katunayaka to Port of Colombo, there will be the lorry Mudalali who does the carriage. So that's one transport. So your contract is with that guy. Then you will have the sea carriage, that will be a separate transaction. Then you have whatever the other carriages at the end. So the problem then is you have so many things to do with so many people for international carriage. that brought into existence what is called a freight forwarder. A freight forwarder is somebody who takes the responsibility upon himself, actually not responsibility, he carries your cargo from Colombo to say the United Kingdom. He looks after everything. He gets the mudalali for the lorry. Then he engages a shipping line to carry it the sea, and everything he engages. And for that he issues one simple document. And the problem is the way it is structured. Freight forwarders, the saying is, it came in one old judgment, it says we will carry you anything, but we will not be responsible for anything, right? Because every time something happens, they say, look, this is not my problem, this was done by the ship owner, right? So the problem is that, but this creature called the freight forwarder came up in the 1970s, 80s. So now most of this, that is the consolidation factor, is done by a freight forwarder. So generally you have standard contracts for freight forwarders done by the Freight Forwarders International Association, that is used and accepted by everybody. So that is a standard. Then for the the sea transport, there is the standard what are called BIMCO. There are several standard bills of lading. Those are used. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Most of the terms are there in those documents. So standard documents are there. Airway bills also are standard documents where all the components of the conventions are included. So generally you have standard term contracts for these, everything.
Right. So basically you're saying with it's air or sea, it's basically the same kind of documentation that goes in?
Generally, because for sea carriage you have what is called the bill of lading. For air carriage you have the airway bill. Legal ramifications are different, legal obligations are different, but basically that is the document on which the goods are transported.
Okay, what are the legal ramifications and obligations different in this?
Yeah, so say for example the bill of lading that is used in carriage of goods has three components. So it's a title to the goods, right? So if you have the bill of lading, that means you have title to the goods. Because you have to produce the original bill of lading at the destination port of discharge, and whoever who brings the original bill of lading, the ship owner is obliged under law to deliver the goods to you. So that is the key, as they say, the bill of lading is the key to the warehouse. So if you produce the original bill of lading, then you have to give it. So that is the first component. Then it is of course the best evidence for the, it's not the contract of carriage, but it is the best evidence as to the terms and conditions of the contract of carriage, right? And the third component is you have it's a document of title. It's the best evidence of the contract of carriage. And the third component is that it's used, it's endorsable, right? So you can transfer title by endorsing the contract, right? I'm very sorry, the third component just slipped my mind.
That's okay.
But those are the basic. But in airway bill, you don't have those, especially the transferability of the airway bill is not there. Whoever who takes the goods to the aircraft or delivers it to the airline will have to collect it. So most of the because it's a less developed system, most of the components of the bill of lading is not there in the airway bill. It's different.
Yeah. Now, when a human is transported, we were talking about the goods transport through these two mechanisms, either passenger cruise ships or largely air transport. What are the laws that get involved, probably other than the immigration thing with the passengers to sort out, the visas and the insurance? Are these the only type of
no, there are different
laws?
Say, especially for air travel, there is Warsaw Convention has specific with regard to the baggage and air transport. Even in shipping, there are separate conventions and separate laws with regard to carriage of passengers. There is a difference between the carriage of passengers and the carriage of goods. Generally, carriage of goods is generally, there are conventions. Carriage of passengers have certain conventions, but also it has a lot of common law, the old common law principles applicable, especially for rail transport. It's the old English common law uses that are used.
Okay. Is Sri Lanka, now we are trying to go into a globalization regime for a long time, but is Sri Lanka, has it ratified all the necessary those international conventions which facilitate international goods and passenger transport?
Yes, because the most up-to-date is with regard to sea carriage is the Hague-Visby, which became law here in 1982. Then we have for carriage by air, we have the Warsaw Convention, that is I think in 78 or 79. We haven't ratified the multimodal law. We haven't ratified the next development of the Hague-Visby, which was the Hamburg rules, which we haven't ratified, but then majority of the countries have not ratified it. It's more or less out of, nobody's using it. Then the latest is the Rotterdam rules. We haven't ratified it. I don't know whether we have even looked at it. So other than that is multimodal and freight forwarding.
Don't you think we should ratify them?
We should definitely, since we are like, Colombo is like the 23rd largest port in the world.
Right.
We are one of the biggest exporters of tea, cinnamon in the world, and also garments. So we need this because the transportation sector is not going to sit around and wait until the laws change.
Exactly.
So they keep on changing the ways of doing their business. Now, for example, freight forwarding or logistic providers have gone way beyond what the original provider of logistics, that is, or providing transport. They are going to what is called third-party logistics or fourth-party logistics. That is, a company doesn't have a separate shipping division, doesn't have a separate warehouse division. It's all outsourced to companies, and there are companies in Sri Lanka who do that internationally. Right? So they do look after the warehousing, they look after the distribution, they look after the transportation. So that is generally third-party logistics, the 3PL, it's 2PL, 3PL, 4PL. So now that is something that is developing very fast, and there is no law. And the way we change our laws, by the time we change the law or we introduce the law, it will be about 25 PL or something.
Yeah. What are the advantages you see in these the changes to this Hague thing and the Rotterdam rules, which we are not adapted, and you mentioned one thing else as well. What are the advantages of adopting that?
Advantages means because our law might stay at one point without going anywhere, but the law internationally changes. Now, as far as...
So if I may interrupt, when we have in the position of not ratified, are there situations that lesser international transport will come here, like lesser, they will be discouraged to come here?
Definitely so, because you need that for uniformity in the system. Now the problem is, as our laws not developing domestically, it doesn't matter. It matters, but as far as our discussion is concerned, it doesn't matter, because that relates to people in the country. But these are situations where we are dealing with people outside the country, and if they are not happy that our laws are up to a certain degree of uniformity with the international laws or the conventions, then they will think twice, because there are enough countries which have set up the legal background, the legal basis to do trade. So if we don't do it, the business will go somewhere else. It's imperative that we have, especially in international trade, we have the most modern systems of law operable in the country.
Right. Now, have this been mooted out by
it has been discussed by the governments, by the trade, by lawyers. More than the lawyers, it's a trade. It's the industries, because they need the laws.
Exactly.
But
action is
nothing is happening.
Nothing is happening.
So they are themselves, they are devising ways by contractual agreement to bring into operation. That can be done internationally. Not every country is completely super efficient in law. So say, for example, the freight forwarder standard terms or the BIMCO terms, they are all contractual. So freight forwarders in Sri Lanka or carriers liners you can't, but freight forwarders in Sri Lanka can agree contractually to bring in provisions of the conventions into your transaction. Even if Sri Lanka doesn't bring the convention into operation, the industry will bring those terms into operation, but it is contractually. So there is no state enforcement, or the country, the state process you can't use the state process to enforce it, but as a normal case you can enforce those rights because you bring the convention terms into your contract as a contractual term.
Is it valid if we were to go to litigation?
Definitely, because it's a term that the parties have agreed with. The source is irrelevant.
Yes.
As long as we agree, we can enforce it in agreement.
Right. Now, most of these disputes, as we were discussing in our previous program about international trade, the most difficult thing is to enforce and where to find a defaulter. Now, when there's a dispute of international transportation, whether a person or a good on air or sea, are there any mechanism, tribunals that are set up internationally specifically and speedily to deal with them?
In transport, in most international trade, you have your standard, you have the ICC system,
right,
where for alternate dispute resolution. So,
right,
you have arbitration, then you have mediation and conciliation, but arbitration you have the ICC. Then also industry specific or commodity specific, you have dispute resolution process. So, for example, the sugar industry has a sugar association in London. There is a process of doing that. So, maritime, there is London Maritime Arbitration. That is a huge industry there.
That is only for shipping?
Only for maritime matters.
Maritime matters.
Then for sugar association, sugar matters.
Yes.
For wheat, you have separate. For coal, you have separate, because you have separate charter parties. Everything is specific. So, that way, and then arbitration, as I said earlier, you have the New York Convention. Enforcement procedure is very easy. Of course, if we had time, we could have gone into litigation and how you can enforce your claims by admiralty, where you have pre-judgment security. That is litigation. The most attractive is to get pre-judgment. That is doing getting vessels arrested or getting Mariva injunctions. But other than that, enforceability, the most effective is arbitration, but it is also the most costly.
Yeah, but you don't have a tribunal like the London Maritime system, not here, I mean for aviation transport, air transport.
Not that I am sorry, not that I
not
know of. No, I don't think so. If I'm, I don't think so. But I haven't looked at that, but so I can't. I don't. But from what I know, there is no such thing.
So you're about to answer. London Maritime dispute resolution mechanism is very, you said, lucrative. Do you think we should have something like that in Asia?
We have already? No, we have in Singapore. We have the SIAC, that is Singapore Institution International Arbitration Center, which is well developed and also superbly organized and recognized, internationally recognized.
But being the 23rd biggest port in the world we are having, we should have something like
basically
that. Right?
All our disputes, we are either settling it in an admiralty case or we are resolving it in admiralty or in arbitration outside Sri Lanka. It's very little arbitration that happens in Sri Lanka. It's developing. It might develop with Sri Lanka coming in as a hub. It might develop. But at the moment, if you want speedy solutions, you need to go to Singapore or London. Expensive though. It's much cheaper to do it here.
Right. Chandaka, thank you once again for joining Law and Order. Thank you for those very insightful thoughts on a very rare subject on law, that is transport law, international transport law. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you very much.
That's Law and Order for today. And Chandaka, Judge Specialist on International Transport Law, was my guest, President's Counsel. And we'll see you next week with another episode on Law and Order. Have a good night. And don't forget to go into our Facebook page. That's Facebook.com/Law and Order. Channel I, and post your comments and your queries. Have a good night and have a good weekend.